Um, we learned this Gemara with regard to Pas Haba B'Kisnin, which is basically cake bread. We spoke about how it really depends on if it's eaten as a snack or if it's eaten as a kaviyas suda, if it's eaten as a meal. And we had two cases here. We had a case where Rav Yehuda was marrying off his son to the daughter of Rav Yehuda Bar Chaviva, and they brought this Pas Haba B'Kisnin, this cake bread, and he heard them saying Hamaitzi. He heard a tza tza tza. He sounded like they were saying Hamaitzi. So he said, "What's going on? You're saying Hamaitzi?" So they basically what came out from that. They had a discussion, of course, dialogue. They thought that the halacha is that you have to recite Hamaitzi, and he said no, it's ein halacha. That the halacha is not like Reb Muna, and then they asked him a question about lachmaniyos. And lachmaniyos you can use as an eruv, whatever. It's some type of rolls, lachmaniyos. I think even in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew today, I think that's what they call rolls. I think they call them lachmaniyot. But some type of rolls. And Rashi
dinner
tells
rolls.
us, what is it? Dinner rolls.
Dinner
Okay.
rolls.
So Rashi tells us it's called uvliyush in Old French. Now, I don't know Old French, but the understanding is that it's some type of a spiced, it's some type of dinner rolls that have spices in it and nuts. Now, they're bringing it in the Gemara to tell us that Shmuel himself had said you recite Hamaitzi on. And if you say Hamaitzi on the lachmaniyos, you should also say Hamaitzi on the Pas Haba B'Kisnin, because it's basically in the same category. And the Gemara concludes and says, no, it depends if you establish a meal on lachmaniyos, you are kaveh suda. That's what you eat as a meal. But cake, it's not meant to be eaten as a meal. Cake is meant to be eaten as a snack and as dessert, and therefore you should not be reciting a hamaitzi on this Pas Haba B'Kisnin. And that was the end of that little piece of Gemara. And then the Gemara got involved in the laws of when does the meal end? What's considered still part of the meal? And with regard to reciting a new bracha. Now, regarding the lachmaniyos, so again, we're talking about these dinner rolls, or these rolls called lachmaniyos. So Rashi says that they're uvliyush. There's some type of it has some spices and it has nuts in it, and the Gemara said that that's normally eaten as a meal, and the bracha on those are hamaitzi. But initially, when the Gemara brought them, the Gemara initially thought that they should be mezainos. I shouldn't say that. Not that they should be mezainos, but rather the Gemara thought that they should be considered Pas Haba B'Kisnin. They should be in the same category as cake bread. Now, Tosfos has a problem with this. He says, if you, Rashi, want to learn that this is this uvliyush in Old French, if this is what we're referring to when we say lachmaniyos, we're referring to this loaves of bread, these rolls that are made with some spices and some and nuts and nuts in them. If you want to say that, it doesn't seem right, because those are for sure hamaitzi. The Gemara wouldn't give that even as a thought. It wouldn't even fit into the thought process, because those are a very thick dough, and there's no reason to even think that they should be called Pas Haba B'Kisnin. It's not like cake. Cake is a very thin dough. You pour it. But this is a very thick dough. Of course, it's hamaitzi. And Tosfos says, rather, we must say that the word lachmaniyos does not refer to those type of rolls. Rather, lachmaniyos refers to a different word in Old French called nilis. And nilis or nilish, this word in the Old French refers to a very thin dough, and it's poured like it's a batter. It's not a dough, and this type of thing is being that it's a very thin dough. It's called, which the Gemara is using as lachmaniyos, and it has a lot of water in it. It's not thick, so this would be what the Gemara is thinking maybe should be pasaba b'kisnin, and the Gemara concludes and says that it depends how it's eaten. If it's eaten as a meal, then it would be a hamaitzi. Now, Tosfos does bring, interestingly enough, it's unclear what this nilish is, but it sounds like it's some type of a what would you say, an apple turnover?
Wafer? You mean like a wafer?
Yeah, maybe like an apple turnover or something, but not with apple in it. With some type of a thin dough, this nilish. Now he says that the custom is on Purim to eat them. They eat them on Purim, this nilish. So he says on Purim when they eat it with they are koivei suda, they recite the hamaitzi on. So lachmaniyos seems it depends. If it's, if you're establishing a meal, it says on Purim that's what they would eat. They would recite a hamaitzi. It's interesting. There is a custom on Purim to eat kreplach. So I don't know if this is maybe similar to kreplach. I don't know if kreplach are a thin dough, but he says that on Purim they eat it and they recite a hamaitzi on it itself. Actually, this Purim I ate a hamantash, or maybe the hamantash, and we had a hamantash that was a very healthy hamantash. It was sourdough with a meat filling. So maybe that's maybe this is similar, that they would recite a hamaitzi. That was their hamantash. In other words, nowadays all of our hamantashen are sweet, and we use it as cake. But maybe originally when they did the custom of hamantashen, it didn't last too long. I guess when you don't add sugar, the custom wasn't successful until they added the sugar. And then hamantashen became a huge business. But maybe originally hamantashen maybe were not as sweet, and they were actually the Purim meal. Maybe it was I'm just throwing a thought out that maybe it was more like a meal, because Tosfos here, and there's another Tosfos on page 38. 38 we also mentioned this thing where he says that they would have on Purim, they would have this nilish, your kevea sudan. So it sounds like maybe maybe this is like some type of a hamantash made with it. Anyway, whatever it is, I don't know. Nilish, they eat it on Purim. It was a custom to eat nilish on Purim. I think Ezra has a old French dictionary. I saw you looking something up over there. Is that do you have the dictionary, Ezra? We can't hear you. You're muted.
I have a French and English dictionary, and I'm looking up old French dictionaries online to see if I can
find anything. Okay, good.
In Spanish, that what you talked about with dough and meat filling is called an empanada. That's something that's eaten, empanada.
Right. Okay, all right. So the two words that we're looking up in the Old French is the uvlius and the nilish. So in any event, Tosfos does bring that Rabbeinu Shimshon says that this nilish, he argues on Tosfos and says that nilish, being that it's such a soft dough, it's more like a porridge, and it never would be a hamaitzi, and therefore it seems like Rabbeinu Shimshon might agree with Rashi. But in any event, that's what they deal with. Again, lachmaniyos, the Gemara is saying depends on lachmanias are hamaitzi, based on the fact that you're koivei asuda, you're eating a meal with them, and that's what we've seen here. That if you're making this as a meal and you're eating an amount that would be eaten like a meal, then it would have the category of bread. It would fall into that category, and it's regular bread. You could recite a hamaitzi on it, and that was so that's with lachmanias. Then the Gemara talked about the removal of the tables, and the Gemara said that the story was Rav Papa happened to be in the house of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nassan, and they brought food. After they finished the meal, they brought food out. Rav Papa took it and he ate it, and they asked him, they said, don't you hold that once you finish eating, you're not allowed to eat anymore? So Rav Papa said, no, salak itmar, that only applies if it's salak, if they remove the tables. So Taisvus has a problem. Taisvus says that if they remove the tables, how could you do that? You're supposed to bench with bread on the table. Anyone here familiar with that custom? You're supposed to, when you bench, you're supposed to bench with bread on the table. You don't remove Yehuda. Okay. And Ezra. Anyone know the reason for that? No, you Ruvain also. Okay. Anyone know the reason why do we bench with the bread on the table? I'm sorry?
It has to be something with the wheat, and that it's sustaining life, and we're at Hashem's table to begin with. In other words, every table that's set with food we're sitting with Hashem. Maybe that's significance.
Okay, well, let's see. Okay, good thought. It's you're getting onto something, Susan. So it sounds good. Yes, Ben.
Maybe if you're doing it on bread, it means that you're really satisfied and there's still bread left. If there is no bread left, maybe you are not really satisfied. You would like to eat more.
So you're saying the reason why
if you can do the blessing on bread, that means you're satisfied and there's still bread left.
And who are you showing that to? Hashem?
To whoever's by the table.
And you're telling them, by the way, I want you to know that I'm satisfied.
Right. And I'm blessing.
In other words,
it's just a thought,
It's more of a honor to Hashem. That you're saying I've received food to satisfaction, and you're revealing that to the people around you. Okay, more like a kiddush Hashem, more like a kiddush Hashem in front of those that see that you're thanking.
You
Hashem.
Still have food left. Yeah.
Okay. Simone, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking that it somehow seems relevant to something we learned earlier, which had to do with when you're picking things when you're picking fruit from the ground, and whether it still can produce more. So when it didn't, you were able to say the blessing when it could still produce, but you couldn't if it didn't. That it's something to do with the idea of abundance and fullness, God's open hand. That it's not in any minimal sense, it's in a maximal sense. I mean, I'm not quite clear what I'm saying, I know, but something
okay,
along
you're
those
throwing
lines.
some thoughts there. Yes, good thinking. Okay, so let me tell you what it says in Shulchan Aruch. In Shulchan Aruch, it says that you should not remove the tablecloth and bread until after benching. And then it says, whoever doesn't leave the bread on the table does not see a siman bracha forever. But you shouldn't bring a whole loaf and put it on the table. And if a person did that, it looks like he's doing it for Avodah Zarah.
Yeah.
So it seems like you should have a slice of bread or something, not maybe whatever whatever is left, you leave it on the table. You should leave some of the bread that's there. You should leave a little.
Even part of the slice, yeah.
A part of a slice of pieces. And then it says, before you do Netilas Yadayim, you shouldn't have little pieces that'll get dirty from the Netilas Yadayim, from the Mayim Achroinim. Even though it's less than a kazayas and you're allowed to get them ruined, so you should sweep so that they don't get they don't get so they don't get mios, disgusting.
A nuisance.
So therefore you should sweep up first. Okay, but anyway, on the table, well, and Shulchan Aruch also mentions that we don't wash our hands. We wash our hands away from the table where there's no crumbs, so it's not a problem. But in any event, we do. It says we should not remove the breadcrumbs. Now, in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings that it should be recognizable to everyone that we are blessing to Hashem on His kindness, that He prepared food for all His creations, and also that the bracha doesn't rest on something that's empty. There should be something there similar to the pitcher of oil of Elisha. That Elisha, when he told when he asked the woman, "Do you have anything?" and she said, "I have a small container of oil." So he said, "Get very many empty vessels, and you'll pour from that container onto the other into the other empty vessels." And we see that the bracha needed a little oil to continue. In other words, he didn't create oil from the beginning, but he used the little oil that she had and used that to spread out the blessing. So by pouring the oil from that original source of it, originally had a little oil, it allowed the blessing to manifest itself. The same thing here, that we want Hashem's blessings from the grace after meal, so it'll be able to manifest itself if you have a little bread there in the first place to begin with. So that's an interesting connection there with the story in the Tanakh, and how there has to be a little for the bracha to manifest itself. Now, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he brings that it's proper not to remove the tablecloth and the bread until after Brochos HaMazon, so it's recognizable. You're thanking Hashem for His kindness. He prepared food. If you don't have any bread left on the table, don't bring a complete loaf. Again, like it says in the Shulchan Aruch. But if there is a complete loaf already on the bread, don't remove it. And then he brings about the Netilas Yadayim. They used to remove the tables, and then they would wash Netilas Yadayim where the table was. They would wash the Mayim Achronim where the table was, and they would first sweep up so there weren't any crumbs there. They would become disgusting when you wash Netilas Yadayim. Especially the issue really is if the crumbs are more than a kazayas fig, that's where you really have a problem. But we're afraid that maybe there are some that will, and it'll be disgusting. But nowadays we don't remove the table so it's not a problem of washing the tilas yadayim, because we don't wash over crumbs, so you don't have to worry. Okay, so in any event, and then there is another minhag to cover the knives when you bench. Anyone hear of that minhag? You cover the knives.
Yeah, it's Rabbi.
Yeah.
It's also brought in Shulchan Aruch here about noihagim l'chases hasakin, but not on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but during the week, the minhag to cover it. And the reason is because the knife shortens the life of man. Not appropriate that it should be on the shulchan, which is connected similar to the mizbeach, which is lengthens the life of man, and therefore you're not supposed to use iron on the mizbeach. After a person finishes eating, everyone here. After a person finishes eating, they should cover the knives. Then it gives another reason. The story is that that there was it happened once that someone read the Bracha B'nai Yerushalayim, and he remembered the Churban, he remembered the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and he was so hurt. He was so hurt thinking of the Beis Hamikdash that he stuck the knife into his stomach, and therefore we removed the knives. Remove the knives when you recite the Brochos Hamazon. Okay, so the question that Tosfos has here is that he says, how could you remove? Our Gemara implies that you remove the tables before you bench. How could you do such a thing? You got to leave bread on the table. So Tosfos is bothered. You see, in the time of Tosfos, they also used to leave bread on the table. And Tosfos is bothered. How could the Gemara talk about removing the table before the Berachas Hamazon? That when does the meal end? The meal ends when you remove the tables. And they that was the minhag. They would remove the tables. Tosfos says, what do you mean they removed the tables? What about the bread? We don't remove the bread before we say the grace after meal. You're supposed to have bread on the table. And we just learned the two reasons for that. One is because you're supposed to be thanking. It emphasizes that you're thanking Hashem for the bread and for the meal. Number two, the second reason was that you need a little bread so that the blessings will the gifts of Hashem will have what to manifest themselves on. So we have the two reasons. So Tosfos is wondering how could there be such a thing that you remove the tables before you say the grace after meal? Yes, Susan.
Maybe what it is that there's a table that stays with bread, and everybody has their individual little like TV tables. Maybe that's what they're really talking about.
Wow, Susan has come up with Tosfos's answer. Very nice.
Are you kidding me?
Nice. Wow, home run.
Oh my God. But that's what we did in my grandparents' house. We had one table with the bread and everything. Everybody would stand around. Then we had these little TV tables at all the other, because there was like 20 people. Yes.
Wow, I used to have little tables. That's so interesting.
Little like TV, like little, those crummy TV table, those little.
Very nice. Okay. Very nice. So Tosfos says that maybe in those days the person who said the blessing, they kept his table there, and it was only the small tables that they would remove. And Tosfos says nowadays we don't have the small tables, so he says don't remove the big table. It wouldn't be right. You should have the bread. You should wait till after the grace after meal to remove the table. Yes, Simone.
Relevant to the bread and why we leave the bread on the table. I remember reading a story about a newlywed who went to his in-laws and he ate up everything that she served him. And then she saw his plate was empty. She served him more. So he didn't want to be disrespectful. So he ate it all up. So she saw his plate was empty again. She served him more. Every time he emptied the plate, she served him more because she assumed that he hadn't yet been satisfied. And he didn't want to not eat it because he didn't want to be disrespectful. So it seemed to me that that's relevant to the idea of bread on the table, because the mitzvah Deraisa is you should eat and be satisfied. So if you've eaten up everything that's on the table, there's no more bread, Hashem is thinking you're not satisfied. So you leave a little bit on the table, there's still bread, it indicates you're satisfied.
Interesting, an interesting thought. Thank you, Simone. So Taisus over here seems to deal with this custom of leaving bread on the table, and tries to reconcile that with our Gemara, and explains that they probably had this main table that they didn't remove, and therefore the bread was on that table. Now, the next Taisus mentions that something that we left, it was a little vague in the Gemara. We had the story of Reb Zera. Rava and Reb Zera went to the Reish Galusa. They went to the house. They went to the house of the exilarch, and after they removed the table, they sent some ristana, and ristana is another old French word, amnistarshiyun, and Rashi on a different place, not here. Rashi translates that word as some type of a meat dish. So they had this meat dish brought out, and Rava ate it. Reb Zera didn't eat it, and Rava ate it. So Reb Zera didn't eat it. Reb Zera asked Rava, "How could you eat it? Once they removed the table, you're not allowed to eat." So Rava answered, "No, it's not a problem. I'm relying on the table of the Reish Galusa, of the exilarch. In other words, we're hosts at his house." So Taisvis over here, he mentions, that it seems a little vague. Are you not allowed to eat after they remove the table? Or do you just need to recite a bracha? In other words, your meal ended. You finished your meal because they removed the table. Once they removed the table, the Gemara's understanding, at least at this point, is that the meal is over and you can't just eat something, right? Because whatever you're going to eat now is not covered by the original bracha. But come on, they just brought out some good corned beef. You're not going to, so recite a bracha and eat it. It's not covered by the previous bracha. Okay, so say a bracha and eat it. What Reb Zera is, I'm not eating. And he's telling Rava off for eating. What's wrong? Say a bracha and eat it. So is the problem that the bracha, original bracha, doesn't now work for the corned beef that they just brought out? Or is it that you're not allowed to eat anything? So Taisus over here says, why didn't Reb Zera just say a bracha and eat? And Taisus answers, he says, maybe this was a type of dish that had bread in it. And he would have needed to say hamaitzi and wash his hands. And this was a pain to have to go somewhere and wash his hands, and that's why he didn't do it. So Taisva seems to follow the opinion that it's not a problem to recite a bracha and eat more after your meal is over. It's just an issue of do you want to go and wash your hands for hamaitzi? In this case, it was a bread dish, so you would have needed to recite hamaitzi, and therefore he says that's why Reb Zera didn't want to do that. However, it's important to know that there are other views that hold that it's prohibited to eat anything, because they look at it. It's not that it's your bracha doesn't exempt the food that you're going to eat now after your meal is over, but that you're not allowed to interrupt. You're supposed to bench now. Once your meal is over, you're supposed to bench without an interruption. If you go and eat something else, you're interrupting between your meal and the benching, which is supposed to take place soon thereafter without interrupting with a new meal. So that is another way of understanding it. Again, Tosfos seems to follow the logic that it's no problem. You can you finished your meal, you want to eat something else, they just brought out the corned beef, okay. Recite a bracha and eat it. Now, this applies, as the Gemara explains, when you're eating in your own house and you decided to bring out some corned beef. If you're eating in if you're a guest at someone else's house, then you rely on the host. So the meal was not really over. But even if the meal is over, Tosfos seems to hold that it's no problem. Your meal is over, and you would decided, you know what? I have some corned beef in the refrigerator. Let me pull it out now. But your meal was already over. In that case, okay, so recite a new bracha and eat it. But there is another view that holds that you wouldn't be allowed to do that because that it's usher, it's prohibited to eat because you're, so to speak, interrupting between the meal and your obligation to bench, and you're interrupting now with a new meal. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say, what if you have food on your dish, they start benching, you're not benching, you want to finish your food and bench later.
So Ben is asking the opposite, the other side of the coin, and that is that we rely on the host. And if the host brings out something else, it means your meal isn't over. But what about the opposite case, where the host is ready to bench and you are not ready to bench? In that case, is your meal over? That's what you're asking, right, Ben?
Yeah.
Your host is ready to bench, and you're like, no, I'm not ready to bench. I want doubles. I want some more of that.
Not doubles. You're a slow eater.
Oh, you're a slow eater. Okay. Sorry, you're a slow eater, and you're not ready to bench. So the understanding is that also is fine, and it works that way as well. That you are able to extend your meal just because the host isn't. It's not a problem.
Okay.
Now the next case. I'm sorry. Did someone else have a question? No. Susan, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, usually a host will kind of look to see if everyone's plate is close to being clean. And in other words, the host is not going to rush the people unless a person is so slow that they take an hour to eat a plate of food.
Right, but it doesn't matter. Whatever the case is, if the host is in a rush, the host isn't, it doesn't matter. The point is that you are the one who has the ability to continue your meal.
But you're the guest.
Unless.
No, I didn't talk specifically on a guest, especially in shul, on Shabbat. Some people start benching, but you're not finished. You're going to continue eating, and then you bench your own.
Right, but so in the shul where everyone's doing their own thing, there's nothing to talk about. Of course, you're on your own. Why would that guy's opinion have any effect on you? Just because that guy's leaving because his wife is getting nervous,
right.
Doesn't mean you have to rush home. But the question that you're asking is a good question in a person's house. That does it all. Do we follow the host both for stringencies and for leniencies? Do we follow him that the meal's not over until he decides it's over? And do we also follow the meal that it's over? Once he decides it's over for you as well? Or can you prolong the meal even if he wants to end it? And
Right.
that's where your question really applies. Okay, so now the next Taisus over here deals with something we mentioned yesterday, and that was a person ate the afikoman, and a person forgot to eat the afikoman, and he said they started to say the grace after meal. They started the havlon b'nivrich, let's bench, and does that end the meal? And it's too late. And the conclusion of Tosfos is that we rely on Hashem's meal. Hashem is the host, and this was a very innovative idea that Tosfos shares with us, that Hashem is the host of your Seder, and his meal is not over until you eat the afikoman. And therefore, if you didn't eat the afikoman, you could, Hashem didn't end the meal yet, and therefore you could still eat the afikoman. So that's definitely a unique law that Tosfos shares with us. That Tosfos adds another very unique innovation as well, and that is that if a person benched already, you didn't eat the afikoman, you don't have to go back and eat afikoman, because number one, you ate enough matzah during the meal that it can be considered the afikoman, and you fulfilled your obligation of afikoman with the matzah that you ate during the meal, which is quite impressive, quite innovative, I should say, because number one, it's not at the end of the meal. You ate it during the meal. Really, afikoman is meant to be after the meal. That's number one innovation. Number two is you did not have in mind that you're eating it for the mitzvah of afikoman. Now, the Shulchan Aruch I should mention in the Shulchan Aruch deals with this. And so there's a chapter in Shulchan Aruch, chapter 477. You're supposed to eat at the end of the meal after you're satisfied, and you eat it with a seba while leaning, and you don't recite a bracha on the afikoman. Should eat it before chatzos. And then in paragraph 2, again, this is practical stuff. Pesach is coming. We're within 30 days of Pesach. We're supposed to be learning the laws of Pesach. Here you got you have these laws of afikoman. If a person forgot to eat the afikoman, he didn't remember till he washed his hands or said havlon v'nivrach. He said, well, let's bench. The host said this. You could still eat the afikoman when you don't say a bracha on moitzi. Now, what happens if you already benched? So if you didn't recite the bracha boirei pri hagafen, in other words, after the benching, there's a bracha boirei pri hagafen. So it says this. If you remember before you recited the Bar Pri Hagafen, you should wash your hands again, because you concluded your meal. You diverted your mind from the meal, so you have to wash again. And you recite the hamaitzi, and you eat the afikoman, and then you will return and say the Berachas Hamazon, and recite the Bayer Pri Hagafen on the third cup of wine and drink it. So that is what it mentions in Shulchan Aruch, that if as long as you didn't drink the third cup of wine, go back and wash again, and eat the afikomen. And then bench, and then you'll have your third cup of wine. Now, what happens if you only remembered later after you already had your third cup of wine? Then we follow what Tosfos says here. Don't eat the afikomen. You can rely on the matzah that you ate during the meal, because the matzah is shmura matzah, and it's good enough for afikomen. It's fulfilling the mitzvah. And however, if you didn't have shmura matzah, then you would need to go back and have afikomen, because you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of afikomen. But assuming you had shmura matzah, then you don't have to worry. Now, what's interesting is you ate stuff after this afikomen. Normally, you're not allowed to eat anything after the afikomen. But what we see here is that b'diavad, if you did already, you still fulfilled the mitzvah of afikomen. And therefore, there are cases where you don't have to go back and eat the afikomen. So that's so in any event, this is an interesting halacha, and it has to do with Pesach, and it has to do with the halachas that we're learning. What is considered the end of the meal? When would you need to go back and continue eating? When would you need to go back and eat afikomen? Okay, so back to the Gemara here. The next Tosfos does mention that if you're eating at someone's house and they keep on bringing more platters of fruit, the Tosfos concludes that it seems you don't have to recite a bracha on the later platters of fruit, because the platters of fruit that you recited the bracha on that came out first, your mind is on the balabayas, whatever he is going to bring out afterwards. Your mind is on that, and therefore it covers the additional fruits that they decide to bring out later. Okay, and then the final thing that our Gemara mentioned was that the person who usually uses oil to smear their hands after they finish a meal, that's considered the end of the meal. And then the Gemara says the halacha doesn't follow any of these things. Rather, what really ends the meal is netilas yodayim, the mayim achreinim, or if you don't wash out mayim achreinim, when you say the havlan b'nivrach, when the host says havlan b'nivrach, that is what really is the conclusion of the meal.
What do you use the oil for?
It seems that in the olden days, that was a very honorable way of ending a nice big meal, is you would smear your hands with oil, and that would be the conclusion of the meal. I'm not sure.
You want to show that there is something you need to wash off.
No, it sounds like just a very wealthy way of luxurious
Oh, okay.
type of custom of rubbing one's hands with oil. It's like a massage. After the meal, you get the massage. It's like some type of a massage. I don't know. Just a thought. So that the Gemara said that there's three things that you do right away, and one of them is regarding karbanos, sacrifices that they would lean on the animal, called smicha. They would lean with all their kayach on the animal, and right after that they do shchita, and they shecht. Let's pull out a Rambam. So in chapter 3 of the Rambam and the laws of sacrifices, so chapter 3, he brings that all the sacrifices of animals, domesticated animals, that an individual brings, whether they're obligatory or donation sacrifices, they require smicha while they are alive. In other words, leaning on them while they're alive, with the exception of the firstborn, habachar v'hamaiser v'hapesach, with the exception of the bachar animal, the firstborn, the meiser, the tithing, the animal that's the tithe, and the carbon pesach. And it says in the verse, and he shall lean his hand on the head of his offering. And according to the tradition, that kol carbon b'mashma, this refers to all the sacrifices except those three. And a bird sacrifice, you don't do the smicha. And similarly, it says, as we have explained in the laws of shkalim, all the money concerning which it was decided should be given to the chest for free will offerings should be used to purchase burnt offerings. The person to which this money belonged does not perform the smich on that animal, nor does he bring the accompanying offerings. Instead, the accompanying offerings are brought from the communal funds. So even if he was a priest, the service of the offering the sacrifice and its hide belonged to the men of the watch. Okay, so everyone can do smicha with the exception of a person who's a cheresh, which means he can't hear and can't speak. He's a deaf mute, a mentally or emotionally unstable individual, shaita, and a katan and a minor, a servant, a woman, a blind man, and a Gentile. An agent, a shliach, does not perform smicha because smicha is performed only by the owners. It says, he shall lean his hand. It means not his wife, not his servant or his agent. And then it talks about if you have a partnership, they all do smicha. Not at the same time, one right after the other. And it says an inheritor, someone whose father passed away and didn't bring the sacrifice, so the son, the Yeresh, can bring that sacrifice and do the smicha. And the communal sacrifices that smicha is done on is the Seir HaMeshtaleach. On Yom Kippur, they do the smicha. They lean on the animal, the goat that goes to the Azazel, that goes off the cliff during the Yom Kippur service. That animal they did smicha on. And there's also an animal when the Bezdin makes a mistake. It's called a par helam davar. They have the three members of the Sanhedrin, three members of the court. They do the smicha on it, and it's done in the Azara. It has to be done in the courtyard, temple courtyard. He's supposed to do it with all of his energy, and he has to be tahar. It has to be pure. The animal should be slaughtered where they do this, the smicha is performed. in the same place, because it has to be done directly afterwards. That's our Gemara. It has to be done immediately afterwards. So therefore, they do it right where they're going to shecht it, and or it's supposed to be done. If you did wait, the shechita is still kosher, and if a person didn't do the smicha, it's still considered an acceptable sacrifice. But although the person is not obligated to bring another sacrifice, his atonement is lacking. So there is, it's necessary, but you don't have to bring another sacrifice if you missed it. Now he has to perform the smicha with all of his might, with both hands, on the head of the animal, not on the neck, and not on the side of its face. And nothing should intervene between his hands and the animal. And how does he do it? If the sacrifice was one of the offerings of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred, so he should have the animal stand in the northern portion of the temple courtyard facing the west. The person performing the smicha stands to the east with his face to the west, so he's facing the Holy of Holies. And he should place both his hands between its horns and recite the appropriate confession for a sin offering, for the sin which warrants a sin offering, and for a guilt offering, for the sin which warrants a guilt offering. For a burnt offering, he confesses the sin of the negative observance of a positive commandment, or of a negative commandment that can be corrected by observance of a positive commandment. So the smicha on these animals have to do with the type of sin that the sin that they're brought for. So he does the confession, which means he acknowledges and admits his sin. So if it's a sin offering, he mentions the sin for which he's, which the sin offering is for, a guilt offering for which the guilt offering is for, and if it's a oila, which is a totally burnt offering, that atones for the person missed out on a positive commandment. So you recite the confession for that, that you didn't observe that positive commandment. It also atones for certain negative commandments that are called the lav hanitik la'aseh. So that, which is a certain negative commandment that can be corrected with a positive commandment. Those sins as well are atoned by a korban oila, by a burnt offering. So those are the type of confessions that are recited when you're doing this smicha, the leaning. And then the Rambam ends off. How does he confess? He says, I sinned, I transgressed, I committed iniquity. In the Hebrew, it's chatasi, avisi, pashati, v'asisi kach v'kach, I did this and this, which means he mentions the sin that he did, and I have repented before you, and this is my atonement. And if he is bringing a peace offering, he should perform smicha with all his strength anywhere where he desires within the temple courtyard, because anywhere in the temple courtyard, a peace offering can be slaughtered, where the animal will be slaughtered. It appears to me that one does not confess on a peace offering. Instead, he says words of praise. So the Rambam says it's not so clear. He just says, it appears to me that you don't say, I sinned, you don't do a vidoy, but you say words of praise. It's based on, there's a verse in the Divrei Hayamim that implies like confession, even on peace offerings, but the commentaries explain that it doesn't mean confession, it means offer thanks. So that seems what the Rambam is saying, that even though there is a verse that might imply confession on a peace offering, but the translation over there should be that it's words of praise, and that's what you say on a peace offering. So that's what the smicha is. So for those that want to know what specifically we're referring to when we do the karbanos, that the smicha should be right next to the cart, right next to where it's slaughtered. So that's what the smicha is. And then we mentioned that the right next to geula should be tefillah, which means right after you say the bracha Goal Yisrael, you're supposed to say Shemona Esrei, you're not supposed to interrupt. And the final thing was right next to Netilas Yodayim, right next to the grace after the mayim achreinim, the water at the end of the meal, you're supposed to do the benching. And then the Gemara added one point after that, and that was that Abaye says that a Talmud Chacham, once you honor, you host the Talmud Chacham, automatically, immediately is supposed to come blessings. And it brings two verses. One is that Lavan said, Hashem blessed me because of you. You came to me and I hosted you. All of a sudden, blessings arrived. And the other source is that Potiphar was blessed with when Joseph arrived and helped out and was the manager of Potiphar's estate. And it says that Hashem blessed the house of the Egyptian because of Joseph. So immediately after you host a scholar, you receive blessings. So these are initially it was 3 immediate things, and the Gemara concludes that it's really 4. 4 things are supposed to be immediate, and the smicha shchita, geula tefillah, netilas yadayim bracha, and Talmud Chacham bracha. So those are the 4 things. And now we are up to the Mishnah. So Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow we'll be able to start and continue on to the next page tomorrow with the new Mishnah on 42a. Okay, well, Sei gesund, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Sei gesund.
Thank you,
Stay
Rabbi.
safe, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.